I'll tell you when it started. It's starting. It's starting now. Do it again, Phil. Do it again. Do it again. Perfect.
That's the image of the year.
The image of the year. It's the final 4020 Not Live with 2020. I can't even remember how the year started now because it seems such a long time ago. Despite the fact the year seems to have gone really fast as well.
It started with 4020 being live.
Yes, I remember going to Leeds every week. I remember working and having 2 jobs and not knowing what the word furlough meant, but now I know what furlough means.
I was talking to somebody today saying clearly, obviously, after the weekend, you know, Rob Burrow is again front and centre, and so he should be. But, you know, it's almost impossible to imagine that the year started with the tribute game where there were 20,000 people in a stadium paying homage. You know, it seems like a different era somehow.
It does, and that afternoon I was at Wakefield where unfortunately Mossy Masai suffered his injury, and I guess that set the tone for the year. Not that we knew at the time, and it's not the kind of thing you should say, is it? You know, it's kind of those silly platitudes people throw out there this time. It's as we will hear from one of our guests later. It's not been an easy year for anyone, and I think, you know, everyone's trying to get through as best they can, and I think we have to be respectful of people for that. Apart from the people who are idiots, and we don't respect them at all. But everyone else, all our listeners and viewers, we've got the utmost respect for you and your continued battles in this strange old world. And we thank you for your support throughout the year. And speaking personally about this program, of course it has changed since January. Of course we're not quite the same team as we were at the start for many various technical reasons, and the program is completely different. But I'm enjoying having a varied list of guests on throughout the year who've offered their opinions and told us stories about rugby league. And I know it's not what everyone wants, but well, you can't always get what you want. I think the Rolling Stones said that.
It's the year of being adaptable, the year of change, the year of flexibility, and now we've got to the end of it from a sporting point of view. I think sometimes you just have to take your hat off, and I think it's like you said, you know, once things changed, it became purely a matter of survival. And the people that have got us through are the players who have been absolutely exceptional. You know, the more you look at the workload and the more you sort of realise what they did to keep the sport going, the more we should be indebted to them. The staff behind the scenes who work so incredibly hard to keep venues safe, and you know, more often than not, although we clearly had incidents of COVID-19 and it did affect some fixtures going ahead or not, you know, we weren't as adversely affected as it could have been if it had been at its absolute worst. I think, you know, the ability to change fixtures at short notice to fulfil our broadcasting obligations, again, huge credit to everybody. And whilst we may question certain individual decisions as to where the sport is going and what it was planning and whether there is division within it as opposed to widespread agreement, what we did was we had the ability to go to government twice and get funding, and not too many sports could do that, and we did that on the basis of the fact that we are still based solidly within the communities that the clubs come from. The value is not just 80 minutes, it's everything else that you offer to a range of people within the towns and cities that the sport's played, and we do have a resonance with some of the most deprived, and I think that gets to places where, you know, governments and councils perhaps can't get to, and that has a value, and we've never been able to put a monetary value on that, but this year we did, and it was £28 million. Now people may say it should have been more compared to others, but actually in where we are and who we are and what we are, you know, that's a fair return that has kept us going. So the owners that have ploughed their money in, they deserve a huge amount of credit. You know, we needed to get to a point where we could say virtually every single team of the 40 professional teams that we started out with got through. Now we lost Toronto, and we've made a lot over how and why and what and who, and you know, the wider discussion about where the sport needs to go if it is to have an expansion policy. But I'm not sure we've seen the end of that North American experiment. I think what we've done is put a toe in some water, and some people who don't want it are almost now being outweighed by some who do. And I think that things like corporate investment, which is something that we'll see unfold in the not too distant future, that even talk of the NRL buying into Super League, closer relationships between the two hemispheres, all that is born out of the fact that we may have scratched something in the North American market, that whilst Super League as it is currently constituted may want to let that go, others don't. So we are on the verge of something quite interesting, and there's very few times in sport that you get that blank sheet of paper moment, and it normally comes from adversity. It normally comes from an economic disadvantage of those that currently have it, and I suspect that we are a very good investment if we can find the right people to come in at the right level, and we have a plan of how that money would be used. So we'll see. It's been the toughest of tough years, but there is some light at the end of our tunnel, and part of that starts with the World Cup.
We're all still going. That's the good news.
And you're waiting for Santa, I can see.
Apparently, hopefully he comes. He's brought Andy Last in the stocking today at Wakefield to add to Willie poaching. New voices behind Chris Chester, which a lot of people have wanted, so that's good news. Do you think Boris Johnson knows Kevin Sinfield's not actually knighted?
No, hasn't got a clue. He doesn't know who he is. He genuinely thinks he already is a Sir because somebody said to him, Sir Kevin, and he went, oh, yes, Sir Kevin, yes, absolutely. And I think what we did see with the sports personality, which I know it's a Marmite kind of a programme, and people get the wrong idea actually of what it is. It's more of a celebration than a crowning. I was just heartened by the respect Rugby League was shown, which it's earned. You know, what Kevin Sinfield himself has done for his teammate is something that I think everybody who is involved in sport can relate to. But I think that the action that they could focus on, you know, the awe with which they talked about how the grand final finished, and I think even the fact that they asked Kevin Sinfield to announce who the winners were, it elevates us to a level that perhaps we weren't at the beginning of the year. So again, out of the toughest of circumstances, maybe we do have a spokesperson. Maybe Kevin could ring Boris, and Boris would answer the phone and go, I've heard of you, your lordship. So yeah, we have to capitalise it. It's not even so much the doors that have been opened. It's how you keep them wedged open, and people whose job it is to capitalise on that, be that bringing in sponsors or broadcasters or corporate investors, as we've said, they now have something to go and sell. Let's hope they can do it. And I think the manner in which the World Cup organising group have gone about their business, the sponsors they've already brought on board that weren't associated with the sport, the fact that they've had the royal seal of approval. I can't remember when this year started. It seems to have gone on forever and yet lasted 5 minutes. But, what we shouldn't forget is that in January, Buckingham Palace was talking about Rugby League. We had the draw for the World Cup. There's been some really notable things that have happened in 2020, aside from all the stuff that is purely let's keep this thing going. So we'll see where we go. I think people got too hung up about Lee as well being given the 12th Super League spot. I am the more and more convinced that at the moment is an expedient decision for 2021, and for all of the other 11 clubs who weren't involved in the decision but clearly would have had some input, and at least in the way their 3 representatives would have voted. It's about getting as much money back in 2021 to recoup some of the losses of 2020. And if the only reason Lee were in was because they bring more supporters than anybody else, then you can see why that is a logic. And I do think that it doesn't mean the death or otherwise of an expansion policy. I think you can only build that back up again in 2022 when you know how much television money you're getting?
They've been there, done that, relegated, admittedly, but they know what they need to do, and they're as safe a pair of hands as there were from the options that were given to them. And every bid had its flaw. Not that many of those flaws were often discussed publicly because everyone got excited about videos and celebrity endorsements or whatever. Lee are what they are. I don't see the point of getting upset about it because what's the point? We don't make the decisions.
I think it makes the Championship a great competition next year because at least 5 of the clubs now have even more point than ever to prove that they should have been the ones maybe who were promoted ahead of Lee. If that gives the RFL a chance to go and sell the competition to new outlets, that's great as well. The other thing about where we are is I'm just struggling to reconcile the 3 processes that we've gone through. So Super League can decide that they don't want a club, mainly because they felt that there was too much involved in that expansion to North America. We then have a different panel that looks at who comes up from League One that decides expansion is a good thing, and that there are some very traditional teams in the mix in Cumbria and South Yorkshire. But we're going to go for the team that is in the northeast of England that is actually promoted on the basis of potential rather than history, which is interesting, but the complete opposite to the Toronto. And then you get a diverse range in the middle, which goes to a different panel who decide that they are going to go with the most traditional of options. So I just think there is an inconsistency of policy there, but let's just get 2021 to a point where we can have a World Cup at the end of it. We can generate, and I think there's a lot of people who wouldn't normally watch rugby league that will be looking at this competition and saying it's really the first global competition that's going to come back to this country. And they want it to be a success because on the back of that, you can have your women's Euros, you can have your Commonwealth Games, you can have, your equestrian world championships or your, canoeing regattas or what. But somebody needs to be the first that puts the head above the parapet and does it well and gets big stadiums full of crowds. And it could well be us. Let's hope that it is, because if it is, I think, again, you've got another string to your bow. And our bow might not have a lot of strings at the moment, but by the end of 2021, it could have 2 or 3.
It's going to be a perfect opportunity because people have their preconceptions of rugby league. They've all seen rugby league on the telly. They know what it is. But they haven't seen women's rugby league before, probably. And they certainly haven't seen wheelchair rugby league. And I think that will, when people see it, and hopefully they do, open some eyes. Because, as we've said before, the other code of wheelchair rugby is nothing like rugby, whereas this is rugby league just to people who happen to be sat down and have wheels on the chairs. It's rugby league. So I'm really looking forward to the World Cup. I can't wait. I'm excited. The World Cup is going to Coventry. It has a big elephant in the town centre, city centre, unless they've knocked it down.
No, I think it's still there.
It's still there. Also in Coventry is our next guest. It's Dave Musson from the Bear Necessities podcast, and he's updated his book. He's going to tell us about it now. Dave, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to talk about your book in a bit, but I've just kind of asked before we started, but how's your 2020 been? I'm asking everyone at the minute just to check in on how people are.
I mean, like most people, 2020 has been, it's been a year. It's been a long year. It's been a challenging year. I mean, from a rugby league point of view, as a fan of a team in League One, I thoroughly enjoyed the 3 matches we got to play this year. As a League One columnist for 4020 magazine, that's been quite challenging, trying to write 12 columns about 3 matches. But I think, you've got to take a bigger picture on it, haven't you? I mean, everyone I know is safe. Everyone I know is well. And yeah, I think you have to sort of hold on to those things. And we're nearly done. That's the main thing. We're nearly done. It feels like there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And it does actually feel like, from a rugby league point of view, something will be happening next year, and that's really nice to look forward to.
Yeah, fingers crossed 2021 is a lot better than 2020. You saw 3 games then this year in League One. Not the season you thought you'd have, but how were Coventry looking at this? That obviously changes off the field in terms of the coaching positions, but how were Coventry looking in the early part of the year?
So I saw 2 games in person. So a pre-season friendly against London Broncos reserve team, which the Bears won, and they looked really assured, really settled, considering the squad had only been together a few weeks at that point. They looked really well organised, really settled. They put up a good fight in the first game of the season against Newcastle. But obviously Newcastle, as has been shown by their promotion, they were one of the standout teams in the league going into the season. And then by all accounts, I know they had a battling defeat in their next game, which was an away trip. But yeah, I think the seeds were there for what should have been a really competitive and really interesting season. And I think, the Bears want to be a team that nobody wants to play. The Bears want to be a team that are difficult to play against. They want to be a team that is fit and strong and fighting for the full 80 minutes. And we got glimpses of that in those first couple of games. And it's been really pleasing to see a majority of that squad has signed up again for next year. I think the additions for next year have been really shrewd. So I'm at that point. It almost feels like a bit of a normal year now, because I'm at that point where I'm starting to get excited about next season and get excited about the fact that there's going to be some new faces. There's some rolling over from last year, but yeah, in short, I think we looked competitive. We looked like we were up for it. We looked like there was a strong squad identity being built even in the early stages of the season. So I think if they can capture that in this longer pre-season that we've got and hit the ground running with it, then we might cause a few surprises next year.
We've said plenty of times League One is a strange competition, because you've obviously got the traditional clubs from the Heartlands in combination with a lot of teams like yourselves, like the 2 Welsh clubs and London Scholars from outside. It's a big split in geography, and a big split as well in terms of resources. And Coventry seems to be one of those clubs who are doing things the right way in terms of not trying to spend money they haven't got to chase an unattainable dream. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I mean, I've been closely involved with the Bears for about 4 years now, and certainly over the course of the 2018 season, that was when I really got to know the people involved in the club a lot more closely. And yeah, one of the biggest things you take away if you have particularly close dealings with the Bears is how well run they are as a business. Like they are always in the black. Every penny is thought out and well spent, and they're going about things in a sustainable way. And I think it's interesting that you look at a club like the Bears, who have not long past their 20th year, and they're still building, they're still growing, and they've got a really bright future ahead of them, I think. And you just compare and contrast that to some of the boom or bust approaches that we've seen from certain franchises and certain teams. The Bears are trying to build a legacy. Look at the money they've got from the World Cup grants. That's all around building youth teams and building a structure and a pathway. And yeah, it's like you say, being a League One and being a League One fan, so having that mixture of I guess traditional and expansion fans, you do always see dissenting voices out there that see, why the RFL giving money to Coventry and West Wales and all that stuff. But when you look at what those clubs are actually trying to do, it's money well spent, I think. And from a Coventry point of view, we're obviously in a rugby union heartland area. There's only so many places on rugby teams. There's going to be players who miss out. And I think looking at the Bears not only as a way of playing sport with an egg-shaped ball, where the ball actually stays in play a bit more and you might touch it a bit more, you might get to do some more interesting things, but actually seeing players like Jason Bass and Joe Batchelor who've come through the Bears and gone up, we're creating a pathway there. We're creating an opportunity to build a career playing rugby. And yeah, it might be a slightly different code than what some people around here grew up with, but it's a really good code. And I think anyone would be at minimum impressed at how the Bears have gone about their business throughout their history and how they're continuing to do it now, and what they want to do in the future as well. I think it's really exciting. And, the other expansion clubs in League One have got those ambitions as well. And I think that's the value they bring to the division. Aside from being somewhere different to go, they are looking at things differently, and they are, they've not got 150 years of history to rely on. So they do have to challenge themselves, and they do have to be creative. And I think that brings an extra level of excitement to the whole league.
I mean, I don't know too much about Coventry other than I've been there twice. And the Ricoh Arena is a wonderful facility, although the football team obviously don't play there at the moment. But it does seem to be a place which is open to new sports. I mean, I've got a background in watching ice hockey. Obviously, the Blaze have been successful for a long time. They came from nowhere, and I guess the Bears are part of that as well now. It seems to be a city that enjoy sport, and I guess with the World Cup coming next year, it's a great opportunity for Rugby League to capitalise on.
It certainly is. Coventry, you're right, is very much a sporting city. I mean, obviously, most people know the football team. As you say, the ice hockey team is a very successful one. 2 rugby union teams in the form of Wasps and Coventry. Speedway has a very proud history in Coventry. Unfortunately, not in the city at the moment, but they had a very successful team. I remember going to watch the basketball team when I was a teenager as well. People in Coventry love sport, love watching live sport, and are happy to embrace sport, and particularly sport for teams that are based in the city as well. And I think looking ahead to the World Cup, I mean, you have to look back to the Four Nations game, a bonfire night, a freezing cold bonfire night, a double-header international of a sport that most people in the area probably haven't seen live before, but people came out for it. And I think that's something that almost gets lost in the narrative of that Four Nations tournament a bit. Is, people always moan that it was a double-header in Coventry on a Saturday night and wasn't that poor planning by the RFL. But actually, like, looking at it from a more positive mindset, it was a massive chunk of people who bought tickets from the Coventry and Warwickshire postcode area. The knock-on effect for the Bears was really powerful on that, in terms of more people came to watch the Bears the next season. And it was still a decent crowd. And it was, it set the foundations for the fact that, we are bringing a World Cup game to Coventry next year. And going back even further, I mean, I went to some of the World Cup the Olympic football matches at the Ricoh in 2012, and they were really well attended. And I have every faith that the people of the West Midlands are going to be, even in a normal year, they'd be coming out to watch world-class sport. But following on from a year when we've not been able to watch anything, I think it's an amazing opportunity for the sport to really showcase what it's about to Coventry and the West Midlands. So I think it's even more of a coup to have Australia coming and a home nations team for them to play against. So, we've got a sort of local-ish team to follow in that game in terms of Scotland. We've got the world champions to watch as well. I'm really excited about the World Cup, and I think people here are really, really going to latch onto it and really embrace it.
It is a superb facility, the Ricoh. I don't think we got back to Yorkshire until about 3 a.m. that night, because we stayed very late working after that, the second game of the double-header. But it was it's a great facility, and I'm sure the World Cup will be a big success. Just back on League One for a moment. A few changes. You mentioned Newcastle earlier going up to the Championship, but I guess not a surprising decision, because they are another forward-thinking club. Yeah,
and I think you look at the. Was it 5 who applied? You could make a really strong argument for any of them, and I don't think anybody else in League One would have begrudged any of those. But yeah, Newcastle. I mean, I was lucky enough to go up there to watch the Bears play there in the 2018 season. Again, another one of those facilities you can't help but be impressed by. I was really struck by the obvious positive relationship that Thunder have got with their rugby union team as well. It seems very much on an equal footing up there. And you only have to look at the reaction to the World Cup games that are going ahead in Newcastle next year as well. Like, that people in that area, similar to Coventry, they love sport. They love having local teams to follow. And I think it's brilliant for Newcastle to have that opportunity to show what they're made of at a higher level, because they've always been one of the standout teams in League One for as long as I've been closely involved with the Bears. And like I said, any of them could have done it, and any of them would have represented what League One is about to a very high standard in the Championship next year. But I think it's particularly exciting that Newcastle have been given the nod on this occasion.
And coming into the competition in West Wales, Gavin Henson and a former man of steel in Rangi Chase, they've made some very eye-catching signings for a team who have obviously struggled at the bottom of the table for their history.
They really have, yeah. And I hope those guys can get on the pitch regularly, and I hope they can form some sort of connection and bring a bit of flair and excitement to it, because those names are going to pull people through the door when we are allowed to go through the door. And they're obviously going to be targets, particularly Henson. I think Rangi Chase will have a bit more league nous about himself to look after himself. But Gavin Henson is going to be a target by some of the big men in the middle. But he's a big boy. He can look after himself. And I think, I was even reading stuff about like the prospect of Henson finally ending up at a World Cup for a rugby match, because he famously never actually made it to a World Cup when he was playing Union. I don't know whether that's a bit of a stretch and a bit disrespectful to some of the other players in the Welsh side, but if he stays fit, he's got a great rugby brain. If you've got Rangi Chase performing outside him, throwing all his tricks and doing his usual stuff, there's a potential there for them to have a really interesting set of foundations to build off. And again, with West Wales, it's easy to look at their results and write them off, but they are making incremental progress. And they've had one of their players have been picked up. I've completely forgotten, which is terrible of me to do this in the interview. I'm completely forgotten who it is and who got picked up by. I think it was by one of the whole sides. But somebody has been plucked from that West Wales team and plopped into a Super League setup. There's some good players there, and it's not going to take that much longer for them to click. So yeah, I think people can write off Henson and Chase as just PR stunts, but if they want to do it, it could be really interesting to see what actually happens there.
Nothing happens overnight, as you say, and Coventry Bears been around for over 20 years now. What first got you involved in rugby league and watching the Bears?
Oh, I mean, involved in rugby league and watching the Bears are kind of two separate stories for me. So I'm from just outside Coventry. I went to school in Coventry. Obviously grew up, Union was the form of rugby I knew, and played that at school and played it at university. And then my third year of university I spent in France, and I was at Perpignan University, and I played for the university team, and because they just don't have anywhere near as much funding as UK universities, we didn't have enough funding to do two teams. So we literally did Union one week and League the next week. And I played on the wing because I'm very skinny and very, very breakable. And the year before I played Union, I think I touched the ball 3 times all season on the wing. I touched it like 6 times in a game when I played League for the first time. I thought, oh, hello, I've misjudged this sport. And then sort of got into it through playing. And then midway through the year, woke up one Saturday morning, went to get a croissant from the local bakers, and was surrounded by lots of sunburnt men from Wigan. And I was very confused. And then remembered that obviously the Catalan Dragons were based there. So started watching it as a fan from that point. Followed the Dragons for a few years, and then really got into the Bears properly when I moved back to the Midlands after university. And the Bears got into League One for the 2015 season. So I went to that first game on a horrendously wet and muddy Good Friday. And so went to a few games over the next couple of years. And then when my wife and I bought a house just outside Coventry, that's what really sparked me to go down regularly. So it was a 2017 season I started going down as a season ticket holder, really. And that's the year I decided to start the podcast, because I'd got into podcasting by that point and just felt it was a fun way of helping celebrate what the Bears do. And then it all just built out from there, really. So it was quite a natural thing, but also quite an obvious team to pick in the end.
You've got the podcast then, Bear Necessities. You've written the book. Well, you've updated your book forward about the Bears. So tell us a bit about the book and where we can get it.
So the book is it documents the Bears' 20th anniversary season, which was the 2018 season, and it's part season diary and part profile of key people within the club. And it turned out to be a great season. It was the Bears' most successful season since they've gone professional. We got further in the Challenge Cup than ever before. Recorded 2 record attendances over the course of the year, and really notably recorded those first wins against Heartland's team, Keighley and Hunslet. And it was just a really feel-good year, and it became very obvious early in the year that there was an interesting story to tell. So I started writing the book pretty soon on in the season and just kept with it. And then those profiles to break up the season diary are really just interviews with interesting characters from around the club. So people who've been involved for the whole time, some of the players and the coach from that season as well, just to give readers a sense of who else is involved in the club and what other stories are going on behind the scenes, and give people an idea of what things are happening just beyond the results, really. So the original version of the book came out last year, and then obviously this year not really had anything to write about, as I mentioned earlier, and I ended up starting this bonus chapter of sort of summing up what happened in 2019, because when you get to the end of the original book, there's a real sense of, wow, Bears are on the verge of something here, and if they can carry this on into 2019, that could be really special. And then 2019 was a really disrupted year for the Bears. They didn't really have a home. The Butts Park Arena was having its 4G pitch laid for most of the season, so the Bears ended up playing across 3 different grounds as their home ground. The season was pretty disrupted in terms of a fixture list because League One had 11 teams last season, so there was always one team not playing. They went out the Challenge Cup fairly early, so that sort of there was just never any momentum in the season. And I'm glad I wasn't writing an entire book about 2019, put it that way. But I thought it was interesting to round up what happened next and just tell the next part of the story. And by the time I'd finished writing that, I thought, well, I may as well do a revised edition. So and that's where it went from there, really. And Alan Robinson, the main man at the Bears, he designed me a very nice new cover for it. And yeah, it's available now on Amazon in paperback and Kindle format. So those people who bought the original from me, I've emailed them the new chapter. And if anyone hasn't received that, please do get in touch and I will send it to you. But yeah, I just thought it was a nice thing to do, a nice thing to reflect on what had happened a year on. And yeah, I just wanted something to write about, really.
Yeah, I keep trying to write things, then just give up because I've got no willpower whatsoever. But I guess what we're all hoping for is that 2021 is more like 2018 for the Bears than 2019 and indeed 2020.
Definitely, yeah. I think there's real potential to see progress on the pitch, and then having that World Cup game at the end of it as well. Yeah, there's so much to get excited about next year. A whole season on that new 4G pitch, which will really suit the style of rugby that the Bears like to play. A new coaching team who seem really engaged, really switch on. A few new faces. As always, 2 of the best kits in the division. You can always guarantee that the Bears have excellent kits, and this year is no exception. And then, yeah, World Cup at the end of it. It's going to be a great year.
They are indeed beautiful kits. I must get my hands on one of them at some point. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get down to Coventry in 2021, but I'll certainly try and get to one of the away games up here in the Heartlands, because it's been a while since I've seen the Bears live in action, so I should make sure I do so again in 2021. Dave, very best of luck with the revised version of the book. If people don't get it before Christmas, then obviously spend your Christmas money wisely and make sure you get a copy. It's called Forward.
It is.
It's a simple title to find. Dave, thank you very much for your time. Best of luck for the rest of the year, and fingers crossed 2021's better, and we'll hopefully meet up at some point in the future.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm
on steroids at the minute, so hopefully I don't get the IFL don't have to pass a drugs test before I put in my application for media pass for next year, which I hopefully will get viewers as we. There we're speaking to Dave from Coventry. They're a forward-thinking club, Phil, and obviously we have great respect for them down there. And as I said to Dave, they do things the right way. They're not chasing unattainable dreams. They're a sustainable club, and as we may or may not see in the very near future with the new TV deal with Sky, if that comes to fruition, clubs outside of the Super League may need to be a lot more sustainable than they are at the moment.
Yeah, always set out to be self-sufficient. Interestingly, the route that they came into existence is one that I think we haven't followed enough with other development areas. So, came out of university, rugby league initially. Alan Robinson got to know a sport he was completely unfamiliar with through playing at university. Then went into what was the Rugby League Conference. So again, there was a tier that they could step up to for development teams, built their club, built interest amongst youngsters in the area as well. They've always had a junior development policy. And I think, we're conscious of the fact that they were in a rugby town, if you like, that Coventry, through their rugby union club, had always had a leaning towards the oval ball and cashed in on that. And I think we're aware enough as well from the very beginning that just because it had the word Coventry, they really were more of a West Midlands club, and tried to broaden their appeal. And I think the one thing that we've all talked about, and Dave clearly is commensurate with, is the fact that the one thing this takes is time. If you think that you're going to set something up from scratch and put all of those foundations and structures in, and within a year you're going to win Super League, then you're fooling yourself. And what you would hope is that, again, with the World Cup coming along, with the fact that Wasps are now playing out of that town, which is increasing the awareness of rugby league, that maybe there is a synergy between them and the Bears at some stage in the future, that they become a 12-month round club where there's involvement from both. You don't have to be completely taken over, to see common and vested interest. That comes down to player development, to getting into schools. I think if you were a corporate investor into the sport of rugby league, which we're talking about a lot at the moment because there genuinely is some kind of interest out there, then you would look at a place like Coventry and suddenly, some of the people who back the likes of Wasps would say, actually, we should have a summer arm, and the Bears have proved themselves as very shrewd and reliable operators, and we should partner with them, and it would strengthen both organisations. I'm excited about what they can achieve, and I think it's an area that we need to nurture rather than just leave. And I like some of the signings that they do. They give people opportunity. I think Alan's connections still with the domestic scene in Ireland mean that there are some links there that if we exploit them, we could have significant return on that. So yeah, full power to Coventry, place I know quite well, and I wish them every success. I think they could be the next Newcastle.
Unlike many towns and cities across the north of England, they haven't got a white elephant. It's an actual giant elephant in their city centre, which is good. And they've got the world champions going there, Australia taking on Scotland, who played really well against England back in that Four Nations game we were talking about with Dave, and which seems such a long time ago there now. And
that was cold. November the 5th to sit outside for 2 games. But again, I think we should tell people that the Elephant is actually a sports centre. It's not a monument. And Lady Godiva, of course. So any town or city that's built around a naked woman riding through on a horse, even if it's a myth, again, it's fine by me. And a wonderful cathedral that is a memorial to the Second World War. So got a lot going for it, and that's before we even talk about Scar.
This is your unofficial Coventry podcast. What else is from Coventry? Not Coventry City these days, unfortunately. I think how much Wasps could spend from the rugby union salary cap, about 0.5%, and they'd be able to get a return on their investment in rugby league. But there you go. I'm trying to think of what. There's no other news, is there? We're not going to talk about news. We'll talk to our other guest in a moment. But there is no news. People are signing people I've never heard of. That's not interesting. Nothing else is happening. Lee have gone up. We've spoken about that. There might be less money from Sky in the future. There probably will be, but we can't do anything. People are getting upset about that. And what are we supposed to do?
Every
spent a lot of money on football.
Yeah, but every sport, Rugby Union have just signed a new deal with BT, and they're taking less money. That is the world that we currently live in. The sport itself has to find new avenues of revenue, and they may well determine the direction that the sport goes in, and we have to either say we want to be the best full-time sport we can be, as near to a majority major sport as we can, or we revert to being what we've always been for 125 years, and we can probably see ourselves through on that, but then we can't complain about the level of coverage we get. So if you want to see 15 minutes on BBC Sports Personality, accept what's coming in a full-time sporting environment, and if you want to be relegated to a single paragraph in the local evening paper, we'll be part-time alongside Speedway and lacrosse.
Lacrosse. I fear I'm going to have to watch Sports Personality now to write about it, but I'm going to just fast forward to any bits with Rugby League. I'm not going to pause it when they go through the obituary section like people do. Go, oh, look, they mention him, or they didn't mention that person. But I'll watch our bit, and I'll see Kev at the end. And
about 9:15. Wind it on to about 9:15.
Because even though I'm a TV license payer, I don't want to give Gary Lineker any more money for listening to his bad jokes. And as I always say, I hope all four hosts got paid the same for doing the same job. But there you go. There was one thing I was going to mention, which is related to TV, and we have extended our deal with the BBC over the Challenge Cup. Still no word over everything else that the RFL have to sell. No word on money, but the good news is the Women's Challenge Cup's going to have more coverage. The Wheelchair Rugby League Challenge Cup's going to have more coverage, which are important in this day and age. People saying we should have sold it to Amazon or whatever. I have no idea about the world. Yes, Amazon showed some rugby union recently. Internationals. The key thing in rugby league we need to work out is who's playing England next, when. I know the next game's at the World Cup, but before that, even after the Ashes series was announced and subsequently cancelled, we didn't have a clue who England will be playing mid next year. I'm sure if I went on to the RFU website, I can see England's next fixtures in a pre-COVID world for the next 5 years or whatever, because they know what's going to happen. Internationals will sell our sport to the general public at large, hence why we're all excited about the World Cup. Look at when the Olympics comes around, hockey, no one watches field hockey the rest of the year, do they?
No.
Or netball or whatever. Curling. It's all about having that flag. And we, as we know in this day and age, the flag is very important.
I think having had an interview with Simon Johnson over the weekend, which will be in the January issue of 4020, December out now, perfect to sit by the fire with your eggnog and no relatives, give you something to read. There will be an England international mid-season. It hasn't yet been announced because negotiations are still ongoing about who they will play, but there is an absolute commitment for Sean Wayne to physically see his players in a game. Now, it may well be that match is played the same weekend that some Super League matches are scheduled, but there will be agreement for internationals to be released for the players, and that should, all being well, also apply to Ireland, Scotland and Wales as part of their build-up to the World Cup. So I think there is an acknowledgement, but this goes back to, again, things that we've talked about a lot, and no doubt we will with our next guest, that you can only really do stuff like this if there is one governing body in charge of it. And that if you want to get players released from Super League clubs, you can't have a separate organisation looking after the Super League clubs who'll say, no, we're not going to release the players. It has to be a concerted effort, and everybody has to be facing in the same direction. And if we've learned one thing from 2020, it's that pulling in two separate directions actually doesn't do the game a huge amount of good.
I should have introduced our next guest in the style of Clive James, but I can't now because we've already recorded it. So I would say, can you hear me, Tony Hannan? But it would make no difference whatsoever. But he's here. We've got a very important guest today, as I'll have already introduced him, but I'll do so again. He's written books, it says here, that have been described as tremendous by Harry Gratian of Look North, where he used to be, and tremendous by Mark Wilson of Radio Yorkshire. Never heard of him.
Never heard of him.
No, and he also he's one of the people who has the unenviable task of making my words better every month, and leaves in the swearing sometimes, which is always good. It's Tony Hannan. Tony, how are you? Well, welcome to 4020 TV. We should have had you on a long, long time ago.
Yeah, I've waited a long time for my debut, as I say in Australia. But no, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me on.
I think you are a co-parent of this whole operation.
What?
we didn't give birth together. No. Saturn and Jupiter collide every 800 years, about the same number of times that Tony Hannan comes on the podcast.
Very good, Phil. Very good. Very topical humour. I wasn't expecting that.
It's taken a while.
What, the topical or humour? I don't know which one. This is the negative Rugby League podcast. I mean, as I've asked everyone, and I keep repeating myself, how are you, Tony? It's 2020. It's been a year like no other. So how are you?
I'm all right. Just fighting away. To be honest, I hardly ever leave the house anyway. I'm a bit of a hermit on the quiet, slogging away at 4020, obviously, and all the books we do and everything else. So I've always got something going on, and for me to actually go out is a rare thing. I quite enjoy the odd trip to Roundhay to see Phil, for example, once every 3 months. So for me personally, it's not been that bad a thing.
When he says go out, what he means is allowed out.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I can't argue with that. But I must admit, like most people, even those who are like me, who are used to working at home anyway, it's quite tough, the idea that you can't go out if you want to do. You certainly miss live sport, that's a fact. And also going to the pub, obviously. I can't wait to get back into one of those. I'm hoping they still exist when we are finally released. But yeah, I mean, and obviously it's easy to be glum about it, but a lot of people have been doing it really tough. So I think you've got to count your blessings, really. And whilst this hasn't been a great year for publishing, it's been quite hard, hasn't it? I'm sure Phil will agree it's had its challenges. By and large, I think we have to, as I say, count our blessings.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the other thing, normally you leave your thank yous until the end, and I love you all, but I have to say that I've been absolutely knocked out by the reaction of particularly subscribers to the magazine, those who've sought high and low to find it in retail outlets that have suffered from not being open at regular times, and kept us going, because we can write stuff until the cows come home, but unless people want to find it and buy it, then we'd be a lone voice. So first of many thank yous, I think, to those that have supported us in what has been a difficult time.
Why do you bother, Tony? We're coming up. This is the December 2020 issue. We had the big party last year. Why do you bother with this whole thing? Why do you bother with publishing a Rugby League magazine?
Well, I think, speaking for me personally, Phil will have his own reasons, but I'm just addicted to publishing, really. It's just one of those things that I've always had a fascination for from being a little kid. Obviously, first of all through comics, but then getting older through the music press and magazines generally, newspapers, everything. Yeah, even when I was like 16 years old, I could have told you every columnist in every national newspaper. It's just something that's always really been of great interest to me, and I've always enjoyed writing. Constantly been writing from being a kid, writing my own stories and things like that. I've also grown up in a sporting household, so sport fed into that as well. And it's just the buzz of actually every month looking at a blank sheet of paper or a page plan, and sort of trying to come up with something, trying to fill it, coming up with ideas, all that sort of stuff. It's a creative enterprise, and I think if you're a creative person, you just get that bug, and you can't resist doing it, really. In some ways, I do feel that we're a little bit like the old chimney sweeps when central heating came in, aren't we? All of us in sort of print publishing, with the old ink trade. In a lot of ways, I'm flogging a bit of a dead horse in the long run, I think. But just for now, there's enough people out there who do like that idea of reading something every week or every month, where we actually can get it in their hands and turn the pages and all that. It's still got that buzz for some people. I hope that continues, to be honest. But we're not getting any younger, any of us, are we? I don't want to be insulting to you too, but maybe it is an idea that's passed. I don't know, or will be soon. But while ever I've got any breath, I'll continue to do it.
I think it's also to do with passion as well. I think you find people that you've got loads in common with, and that might be belief as much as anything. And you just want to keep doing it. You've got this desire that long form has a place. And I think one of the reasons we started doing this was because we saw a gap in a market, and that market admittedly is shrinking, especially with clubs now doing less programs, for example, and felt that rather than rushing headlong into the new world of, you know, headline only and short attention span, there was still a place for context and history and culture and whatever you might call the Rugby League society. And we wanted to reflect as much of that as we could. I think the other thing we wanted to do was encourage new talent, because as Tony just said, you know, we're not in the first flush of youth, handsome devils though we may look. And I think we wanted to find, you know, the next generation of writers and illustrators and photographers and give them an opportunity, but in a way that was different to just sitting behind a keyboard at home and having an opinion. So that was sort of part of the rationale behind it. But using words like that makes you think that we thought about it. And of course we didn't. We acted on instinct like we always have done.
It was a bit of a wing and a prayer, but what I do think as well is that the way that sort of news especially is, you know, access nowadays tends to be online, and it's obviously it's not so much about how a thing's written, but the information that's there for a lot of people. And I think that also with books as well, I grew up reading those obviously and still do, and, you know, consume loads of books. Sounded like Donald Trump then, didn't I? Bigly. Consume loads of books, bigly. But no, the actual process of reading, the pleasure in writing, not just what's being said, but the way it's being said and all that. So just promoting that aspect of it within Rugby League as well, because we've not got to forget Rugby League's part in it. We started a magazine about Rugby League. So obviously there's a love of the sport in there too. And what we're basically trying to do is promote the idea that people within Rugby League, especially writers and as I say, creative types generally, illustrators, photographers, whatever, can sort of look on what they do in as artistic a way, perhaps, as a writer in any other, you know, field of culture or any other sport. I think there's no reason really. I know certainly when I first got into Rugby League journalism, which seems like a long time ago now, about 25 years ago, as I say, I came out of reading music publications, the NME and Melody Maker and so on. And I sort of came into it with the ambition of bringing a bit of that to it for myself, never mind for any readership. Didn't imagine that time anybody would be interested in reading it. But what I wanted to do was write in that manner. And of course that was initially with League Express. So, you know, that's also part of the rationale still, I think. I think when you've got that sort of day every month to look forward to, where you can pick up a magazine, you know the people who are going to be contributing to it, it does start to pick up, you feel like you're part of a gang really. And when you know every month you're going to be able to read somebody like Ian Molesworth, for example, or Martin Kellner, or Christopher Irvin, or Gemma Carter, you know, people who are going to have ideas and you're going to sort of feel comfortable with them. Like, I won't go so far as to say they're part of your family, but it's got that feeling about it. And I think that's the same for anybody who likes to read magazines and newspapers. You feel you're part of that gang. So that's something also that we've been very keen to promote, the idea that 4020 readers, we're all one big gang really.
I don't want to have to explain to the younger viewers what the Melody Maker or NME was, because they won't believe that you used to be able to buy newspapers about music.
Yeah, and smash hits as well. I mean, you know, that was a sort of a slightly different take on things. But there's a lot of what we do has got that sort of vibe to it, I think, where we will go for the humorous angle if it's there. And you want intelligent features, but you don't want them to be boring and preachy. You want a bit of fun about it as well. And I mean, for example, our TV columnist is very much in that sort of vein. Wouldn't you agree, Richard?
Preachy, yes. Humorous, no. I mean, I'm glad I got some swearing in this month, but I was quoting, so it was okay. I don't want to turn into the Guardian and just put big words in there for you know, just for the shock value.
But we're not wizard and chips either, are we? We are, you know, we are for grown-ups. So, you know, if people do swear, I mean, which is not to say there's a swear word on every page or every paragraph, but if it's relevant and if it's necessary, then what the hell, you know? Who are we to sort of judge people?
It was there to make a point.
We've got Louis McCarthy Scarsbrook as a columnist, so swearing is almost, you know, mandatory in that respect. I think the other thing is that whilst the actual, you know, completely along the lines of we're not here to preach, I'd like to think at points we've held people to account, and that was sort of slipping out of rugby league in a way, and you know, we do have our idea of perhaps how the game should be run, and we've never hidden away from that and what's important. But I think, you know, if people say things and they're not pulled up on it, then you can't really call yourself a journal in any true or honest, respectful way. So whilst the phrase fourth estate is, you know, needs defining, and I'm not sure that we are in a rugby league sense, I think that's what we'd like to be. That you know, we may not agree with everything that's said, but if somebody's going to say something and not live up to it, then there is a responsibility to point that out, I think.
Yeah. And that is the serious part of journalism that does, as you say, it does need to be there in rugby league as well as all the creative stuff. You do need to do that. And I think there is a tendency within the game, I certainly noticed it when I was a little bit more actively involved in match reports and things like that, where it is being quite a small sport in relation to other big sports, for example. People do tend to know everybody else. And that includes coaches, that includes club owners, it includes players. People do tend to be familiar with one another, and if you in rugby league journalism have a pop at somebody on a Monday morning, there's a good chance that within the next 2 weeks you're going to bump into that person again, and so I think that does tend to breed something within the game's journalists of just being a little bit careful about what they say, not wanting to upset anybody. It's not so much about being banned, although certain clubs do go that far, as we know, but it's more a thing of getting on with people. You might like them, and therefore that restrains you as well from giving them some criticism as and when it's deserved. So I think that's something else that we're tending to avoid. And as I said, the way we get around doing that is I don't go out, so I don't see anybody at all. So I'm not going to see them in 2 weeks. So we can say what we like. Now, I'm of course half joking about that, but there is a serious point to that. I remember Harry Edgar always used to say it. I'm sure some viewers will be familiar with Harry, who launched the original Open Rugby magazine. And Harry very rarely went to games, so he felt able to criticise absolutely everybody within the game. He wasn't bothered, and consequently, I think the people within the game slightly mistrusted him as well. But I think that if you're serious about serving the reader, which is what you should be doing, you're not there to service each other. You're not there to sort of keep friends. It's nice if you do, but that's not your role. Your role is to provide a service for the readers. They're the ones who are handing over the £3.95 every month. So you have an obligation to tell the truth and not hold back. And I do like to think that Forty20 has sort of taken that on board, whilst being fair, of course. You don't just want to be slagging things off for the sake of it. It's easy to be critical of the governing body over and over again as almost by sort of a knee-jerk reaction. So you need to stay away from that. But where criticism is justified, I think that if you're a serious publication, you've got to do that.
You know, I should have built this interview as an exclusive interview with you, like the clubs do when they sign a new player. We've got this exclusive. I don't know how we've got this exclusive interview, but there you go. Phil's been to games since lockdown. I haven't. How have you found following the sport in this current COVID world?
Well, it's been weird, and that's been the same for all sport, to be honest. If you watch football, it's not quite the same, is it, without a crowd? In rugby league, similarly. I think rugby league's probably coped a little bit better, though. It sort of comes across, it has more immediacy to it, really. I don't know what it is about it, but I think the game's actually done quite well with its Sky coverage this year, especially that grand final. You, after a while there, by that time, you'd just completely forgotten there was nobody in the ground watching it. It's just riveting television. But that, of course, comes down to the sport itself. And as I say, because I tend to spend most of my time now working on the magazine and all our books and everything, I don't get out to games very often. So the way I do tend to see the game nowadays is through the television. And I really would have to hold my hat off, I think, to the game for the way it's conducted itself through this. I think it's done remarkably well, really, and finishing on that high when in a season when every minute actually did matter, couldn't have been done any better, could it?
I think I tweeted something today. I can never remember what day it is at this time of the year at the best of times, but you know, we've had an amazing Challenge Cup final, which was featured on terrestrial television, 1 point between the teams. We've had a most sensational end to a grand final that probably in the history of them. And then even last night with sports personality, whatever you think of it and whatever you think its value is, and it is a very well watched programme. And we have not only the 15 minutes featured on Rugby League, which I don't think we've ever had before. Normally your timeline the day after is full of, we managed 15 seconds, how disrespectful. There was actually
good impression that called,
thank you, I don't know who of. There was actually Claire Balding. No, there was actually a section said Rugby League. We've not had that before. But the way it ended with Kevin Sinfield announcing who the winners were, we've actually ended the most difficult year in the history of the sport in terms of its income generation, with arguably our highest profile outside of those of us that talk about it all day and every day. Now, that pointing out is one thing, building on it is another, and that's a perennial problem that sports have. But actually, at the end of what has been a really difficult year, it's encouraging, and sometimes it is for the wrong reasons. I'd rather we weren't talking about Kevin Sinfield doing heroic things because of the need that he has to do them. But suddenly we've got people aware of what this sport means, what its values are. We talk endlessly into a vacuum about the Rugby League family without defining what it is. But other people were looking at what Kevin Sinfield had done for his teammate and relating it to the sports that they watch, and other professional sportsmen in high profile guys in football and rugby union and golf and athletics are all praising him for what he's doing because they can feel that it means something. The genuine reason why we all love whatever sport it is that we love. Is motor racing a sport? Who knows? But the truth is that we've got something to build on if we can do that. That, as Tony said, the games that we've had have created a fantastic platform for those that don't really follow the sport to say that something a bit special here. But we've now got people that are extolling the virtues of what we think we already know. The onus is now on everybody involved in the sport to try and cash in on that.
I think next year, all things being equal, and who knows what's going to happen, but all things being equal, you've got the perfect opportunity with the World Cup at the end of it, which certainly by the look of it is going to be quite a big event. You've got Claire Balding sort of banging the drum for it already, and it should have the highest profile ever of a World Cup, that one. So if the game can't build towards that, then it's in trouble. But of course, the big thing is money, isn't it? Everything comes back to money in terms of rugby league as a full-time professional sport. And the bottom line is that we've seen today's stories where Super League clubs will be getting half as much cash, which is obviously going to have a huge impact on the sport generally, you'd think. And the sort of direction of travel in terms of TV money is only one way from here on in, because as we all know, things are changing. Everything's going online like this, and streaming services and so on. So Rugby League, and especially its top flight, whatever that's called, and if we're going to carry on calling it Super League, has to actually live up to that. And the people running the game have to find a way to make it more glamorous, to open it up to bigger audiences, and then get that cash if they want the game to be full-time professional. If they're not bothered about that, if they want to go back to being a part-time sport, and I may have said that would be fine, if they want to do that, there's nothing wrong with that at all. If it just wants to be a small sport based in the north of England, by and large. I mean, one of the books you were talking about before, Richard, Underdogs, when I spent a year at Batley, was the most fun I've ever had in a rugby league season. The Championship's a wonderful competition. Next year it's going to be even better because you've got Lee out there now with all their great team. That's going to be really competitive. But it's a situation therefore where you've got, very likely next year, the division below your top flight being the most interesting. And you've got to really think to yourself, well, where do we want to go? We need a bit of a roadmap here. What's the plan? And I think the big problem with the game is very often you don't see what the plan is. And I think more so than ever, that's the case now. You have no idea what the people in charge of the top level Super League actually want from that competition, where they want it to go. It's all on a wing and a prayer. And I think if there is a worry about the game at the moment, it has to be that.
You mentioned Underdogs there. One of the other books you wrote was about a controversial figure in our sport. You mentioned television broadcasting and how you watch the game at the moment. Sadly, I'm too young to remember him in his pomp. And of
No.
course, I'm afraid so. Although I found an episode of Blankety Blank with him on YouTube, so that's part of the column next month. Eddie Waring, he wrote in the magazine recently, which is amazing. What do you think he would make of where the sport is today? And do we need a new Eddie Waring, so to speak, to push the cause of the sport nationwide?
I think in terms of new Eddie Waring, you see, Eddie Waring, I think the book's still available if anybody wants to have a dig around online. I'm sure you'll find it for about 50 pence here and there all over the place, because it came out in 2008. But I think even since 2008, we do have a lot more Eddie Warings going around, as Phil's just saying there. I think in terms of rugby league popping up on BBC Breakfast and things like that, those sorts of people are around. And back in the day, it was Eddie really who got us on terrestrial television. In fact, he did. And he was like the highest profile figure. Now that came with baggage, because they had the sort of stereotypical northern comedian persona. So some people obviously got very upset about that. Others just saw it for what it was. That's certainly the way I saw it, is that he got us into shows like It's a Knockout, which were huge, and in everybody's front room. And then got that sort of attention. It's up to the game itself then to reinvent itself if it wants. So it's just too easy to blame Eddie Waring for that, I think. But yeah, it was a real character. There's no question about that. And also, his story was basically the story of rugby league up until he died in the 1980s. You could trace it right the way back. His parents, for example, were in the same room as people who'd been in the George Hotel in 1895, and his brother went to the first Wembley Cup final in 1929, and he'd been to goodness knows what else. But what he would think about today's game is he would be very much in favour of all the modernising. He would definitely be chasing up streaming, since it was Eddie who was behind trying to get us on television in the first place via his trips to America. He would have been a huge Toronto Wolfpack fan, no question about that. He would definitely been in favour of that sort of stuff. And more besides, I think what he would have said in terms of where the game is now, I'd flatter myself to think he would have had a similar sort of view of it to me, insofar as he was always one for expanding the game, as I've always been, and sort of banging the drum for what it could be. But at the same time, understood that the game was very tied close to its original northern communities. You have to respect that, and you have to deal with that politically if you're going to take the game anywhere. His big thing was, if you're going to expand in this country, do it by degrees. So get down to Doncaster, concentrate up in Cumbria, get it into the northeast, place like Newcastle, for example, that sort of carry on. That was Eddie all over. So I think, were he around at this time now, sort of half of him would be excited, and the other half would be sort of yelling at the people in power. The difference between Eddie and me, of course, is Eddie would have actually been round there to Red Hall, and it'd be in with the executives, sort of telling them off face to face.
Except he wouldn't. He'd have been in the Queen's Hotel.
Yeah, well, they'd have gone to the Queen's, wouldn't they?
They'd be going to see him. I think I learnt loads of things from Tony's book, because we all think we know, those of us of a certain age, Eddie from his persona on the television. But I think what knocked me out was the beginning of his story, where he actually was an entrepreneur before he even became a broadcaster, where he could see opportunity. Now, he getting onto the 1946 Indomitables tour was massive. He was the journalist that all of the players trusted. He was the guy that brought back films of it and went round the cinemas and gave you an insight into what had happened. He was the guy that in Dewsbury, added the Black Knights to the junior team, almost 2 generations before, Huddersfield became Barracudas. He genuinely was the Peter Deakin of his day, to coin an analogy that may not be fair to either of them. But what he saw was opportunity. And he was very much at the forefront of it, so much more than just a guy who picked up a microphone when Grandstand was on.
No, he's just a great character and good fun. And if you can get yourself a copy somewhere, I think people would enjoy it now. Because it does teach a little bit about the history of the sport, but also it really opens Eddie up. I hope it does anyway, as a human being and a rounded figure. Because what he was basically, as well as being an entrepreneur, was an entertainer. I mean, growing up, he wanted to be on the stage, and I think given a choice, he would have been a singer, really, which then accounts for him acting the way he does when he gets on with Morecambe and Wise, and as I say, It's a Knockout and things. That showman in him tended to come out, and of course, it wasn't just that. He also sort of got all the impressionists going because it was such a distinctive voice that he had. It wasn't really a northern voice, was it really? There's tinges of northernness in it, obviously, but it's ever so slightly bizarre. And of course that got him noticed by people like Mike Yarwood and the Goodies and Monty Python and these sorts of people. So it was great for Rugby League, I think, but it did come with that image thing attached, which I think, I was going to say the game's even now struggling to shake off, but you know what? I think it sort of is really. What do you think, Phil? I'm not quite sure that nowadays Rugby League does have that same image to quite the same extent.
Well, again, I think the nearest point of reference is looking at Kevin Sinfield last night, and I know we keep going back to something, but turns up in a major television presentation in a three-piece suit, looking very much like Jordan Henderson did when he was on the stage before him, talks in an accent that is a hint of Northern, but clearly is not your traditional stereotypical caricature type Northern accent that so many people might still associate with the game that don't follow it, and looks very much like a modern professional sportsman. It doesn't look like a 17-stone prop forward who comes from Halifax and speaks a certain way. And I think, that's the full-time professionalism has brought us a different type of character that we do need to capitalise on, that they do stand, absolute scrutiny with the best of the rest. And it isn't anymore about purely being a Northern stereotype. It is about being, the consummate professional in whatever sport you happen to play.
And it's actually moved us on a little bit from even the recent past with Eddie and Steve-O, because they would face the same sort of criticisms, wouldn't they, that were thrown at Eddie Waring. And there are a lot of similarities between Steve-O and Eddie Waring, not least the fact they're both from Dewsbury. But over and above all that, they did get the same criticism, as indeed did Barry and Terry shortly after as well. But I do think that the game's sort of managed to reinvent itself quite nicely.
Well, Brian Carney, again, is, the complete opposite to who you would normally think would front Rugby League. I think the grand final coverage on Sky with John Wilkin, with Danny Maguire, with Jason Robinson, all held together by Brian Carney, even probably 3 or 4 years ago, you wouldn't have thought that is a very dynamic modern image that, again, we should be building on.
Brian Carney's great. I love Brian Carney. That's probably put in about every column I've written so far. Now, in the mid-90s, when I wasn't watching Rugby League in the summer, I'd find myself at Headingley because my grandparents were members, and I used to get dragged along to see possibly Yorkshire's worst era of cricket ever. So why I'm still following the sport, I don't know. And you've got I say a new book, it's been out for a while now, Tony, but tell us about the Wicket Men.
Yeah, the Wicket Men, I wanted to do something similar to what I did with Batley, which is to spend a year in the town and sort of come up with a book that wasn't specifically just about what it said on the tin, if you know what I mean. It was like the Underdogs, yeah, of course it's about a season with Batley Bulldogs, but much more than that, it's sort of painting a picture of the sport at that lower level, whilst also looking at Batley as a place and how it's getting on in this time. And of course, during the time I was there, all sorts of things happened, not least the sad death of Joe Cox, and we had the Brexit referendum, Batley Variety Club closed down and all that. Now, when I started writing that book, I had no idea that was going to happen. I knew Keegan Nurse had come out as gay, which was another theme of the book, but all the stuff that was to happen throughout the season, I had no idea about. And what I wanted to do was take that sort of experiment and do the same thing with cricket, which is another of my favourite pastimes. And the way to do that, I thought, at a similar sort of level, the less glamorous end of the game, would be in the minor counties competition, which, funnily enough, was also born in 1895, just by sheer fluke. But I just figured I didn't know anything about the minor counties. I had this sort of vague idea that it would be full of blazered old duffers who were supping port, and the wives would be making the sandwiches, and it'd all be very polite little smashings of applause. Oh, I say well done and all that sort of stuff. Bit of an upper middle class game, really, or element of the game. But that turned out to be just as sort of valid as the idea that Rugby League's just played by like 10-stone meathead northern blokes, being in the mud. It just completely inaccurate, really. And when you actually got into it, and I followed the season through Cumberland, up in Cumbria. I took that opportunity to get up there for a summer, and why wouldn't you? Especially when it turned out to be the hottest summer since about 1976, I think. And just following them around the country, obviously it went up and down the land there because the minor counties have got teams from Devon and Cornwall across to Suffolk and Norfolk, Northumberland and Cumberland, who are now Cumbria because they've reinvented in the north as well, and all points in between. So doing that, I got a real feeling for what that level of the game's like, and an admiration for the quality of the players who actually play the game. Many of whom go on to play for first-class counties, but also internationally as well. Don Best, for example, at the moment, came through that thing. And I also took the same approach in that you get to know the players, you get to know the personalities behind the scenes. So the people who are actually volunteering, and they are volunteers at that level of cricket as well, just as they are in rugby league. And the politicking that goes on at that level, and the things that happen unexpectedly, and a very entertaining season unfolded, really, with a few twists and turns and stings in the tail. It's just a very enjoyable thing to do. And I think anybody who likes sport, not necessarily big cricket fans, but will probably enjoy it in much the same way as lots of people who weren't rugby league fans enjoyed Underdogs. That's the ambition, anyway.
As we run out of time, as we always tend to do, what would you hope for rugby league going forward in 2021 and beyond? Especially, as you mentioned, the financial situation is unclear. When crowds will be back is unclear. So I'm asking you an impossible question here, Tony.
Well, the first thing you want to see is people back in grounds again, and getting the old vibe back to the sport. I mean, that's a must, isn't it? Because such a big part of many people's lives. And I think once you start breaking habits, it's a dangerous thing as well. People, you said it yourself, you went to watch cricket, even though Yorkshire at that time weren't a particularly good side, but you got in the habit of doing it and you continued doing it. And I think once you break those sorts of habits, it's really difficult to get people back on side there. So when the game does actually return to stadiums, it's going to be a really important bit of promotional time, I think, for the game to really make sure that comes back with a bang. And then after that, I'd just like to see, as I said earlier, a sense of realism about the game, what it wants to be, where it's going to go, and having decided upon that, worked out the best way of getting there. I think basically, you know, the game been going 126 years now, so gone all that time and still be pretty much in this country anyway, within the same sort of boundaries as you were in 1895 is a bit of a disgrace, to be honest. I think you have to have higher ambitions than that. Even if you decide that transatlantic competition is one step beyond you, you've still got to look a little bit wider. And there are encouraging signs. Clubs like Coventry, clubs like Newcastle do bring a lot of hope, I think. But so, yeah, basically that. I'd just like to see the game get its act together, get people in charge who are really good at what they're doing. That matters a lot as well. People of vision, but also pragmatism, because you've got to marry those two things together. No point having great ideas of playing the game here, then everywhere, if you don't have the people who can deliver that. So, yeah, I think that's what I'd like to see.
I think there's a couple of things. One is I'd like to see those in charge of the World Cup retained in some way. We spoke briefly about that, I think, the last time we were on, that either employed to give us World Cups every 4 years that are as well organised as 2021 seems to be, and taking us to new and different locations. I think the other thing is there is a dichotomy looming, that if we are going to get some kind of external corporate investment, then what they're going to want out of the game might be different to what club owners as currently exist want out of the game. And that is going to be a process. It's going to be really, really difficult to reconcile. It's going to need strong leadership, and certainly through everything that's going on in other spheres at the moment, we've seen how important strong leadership needs to be at times like this. So I'd like to see the game come back under one single administration with a plan of how it was going to move forward. And then I'd like to see some kind of recognition that it isn't necessarily always solely the club owners that can make those decisions. And if they are going to invite new money into the game, then they're going to have to compromise on a couple of things. So it's an interesting period that's approaching us, I think.
Vision and pragmatism. And I'm not sure if we'll sell many T-shirts with that on, but it sounds familiar. I don't know if do they know words like that in Belial. I don't know. Tony, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us. And the book is available in all good independent book retailers. That's the message I should say.
Far and wide, yeah.
So if you're a fan of cricket, or if you're a fan of sport, or if you're a fan of books and stories and things, the Wicket Men is for you. Or Wicket Men is for you. I think there you go. I think I've got that right. Tony, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and hopefully we don't see you at any games and you manage to stay in your house as much as you want to in 2021.
I'll see you next Christmas. I'll come down the chimney.
So as we draw to a close on this extraordinary year of broadcasting and rugby league and everything, and we'll do the thank yous at the end and get all maudlin and that. Actually, yes, it's been 2020 by and large has been rubbish. We can all admit that. Lots of people sat at home, not being able to work, not being able to run their businesses, not being able to go watch sport, go to the theatre, do anything they usually do because of this blooming virus. But, hopefully, it's on the way, apart from this new version of it that's just come along. COVID 2021, just if you thought COVID 2020 was bad, here we go. But nice, it's all right.
COVID 2021, the sequel.
Yeah, dun, 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 dun. Even the Christmas telly's rubbish, which is no surprise. Even the 4020 TV Christmas special, which A, I can't be bothered to produce, and B, I am actually going to do one, but it is going to be very much cannibalizing last year's Christmas special, which people didn't watch, so it's all right, I can get away with it. There have been some good points in 2020 amongst the dross, such as the Challenge Cup final. That was good. Rhys Williams' try was good. Claire Balding on the telly, she was good. The grand final was unbelievable, and as we mentioned there, the coverage was brilliant. St Helens Wigan won the League Leaders' Shield in front of no one, and celebrated more than Saints did when they won it in front of their own fans. And there were good points. Yes, if you're a supporter of a team like mine, where the season just seemed to happen, and there's nothing much you can do about it because there was people failing tests and people getting injured and this and that and the other, then it was a difficult year. And but by and large, at the end of it, we got worthy champions in St Helens. Leeds are back, although they're not back, and we've got plenty to build on and hopefully be excited for heading into that World Cup.
I think the other thing to pay tribute to is the NRL, because they did lead the way in bringing back team sport. They refused to accept that there were going to be restrictions on them that they couldn't get round, and even if it meant teams relocating, they did it. It meant putting on games probably before anybody else did, but putting in the right safety procedures, they did it. Getting crowds back into stadium, they did it. And I ended up with an amazing grand final that produced worthy champions who'd sacrificed a lot. So I think as a sport globally, we probably have shown our qualities more than anybody. Now, I would say that anyway, but I just think it for all of the hardship of which we should not shy away from the fact that it's been an awful year, not least for anybody who's lost anyone. I can't imagine that when we all sat there in sort of January, February previewing the new season, the likely winners, we thought that 67,000 people nationwide wouldn't be with us by the time we're reviewing it, and I don't think we should ever forget that ultimately it has been a tragic loss of life. But if you're talking about sport, the role of sport, rugby league's role in the return of sport, we've done all right. And there's a lot of people that should take credit for that. A lot of decisions that were made that I think we'll look back and say were brave. And I think the one thing we should never, ever forget, and we mentioned it a bit with Tony just before, is that we know the players are exceptional. We see what they do week in, week out. We're great advocates of them because that's why we write what we write, we watch what we watch, we extol what we do. But I think they've gone above and beyond this year, because not only have they put themselves under unbelievable duress in terms of the fixture scheduling, but they've done it for less money. And I don't think you can say that enough, that forget who you support, forget where they finished on a league table. Every single player that made a commitment to keep the game going deserves our utmost praise and credit and thanks. And you said, you're quite right. We have to end the year with thank yous, and sort of we did mention it when we were with Tony, because I do think it's important. But we couldn't even do programs like this. We couldn't bring out magazines every month. We couldn't produce books on rugby league. And one of the things I'm sort of really proud of this year is that we were part of the 125th anniversary celebrations by bringing out Tony Collins's book, which I still think will, in years to come, will be seen as a seminal tome for understanding what this sport means, and written at such a time where it was undergoing transformation that it couldn't even have envisaged. I think all of that is done in the spirit of the fact that without the people that are watching this and buying it and supporting it and sending us letters saying keep up the good work, or even going on social media saying you talk a complete load of rubbish, without any of all that sort of interaction, we couldn't do it, we wouldn't do it, and we wouldn't want to do it. And that the most heartfelt and sincerest thanks go to everybody that has taken the time and the trouble to interact with 4020 over these 12 months. And I'm not going to get a hanky out and cry, but I could, because we really do value your support in every way.
We should set up another podcast like everyone else did during the lockdown one. Remember that, everybody? Seems so long ago. Oh, those glory days. And it gave the BBC the opportunity to show all that old rugby league on the telly. That was good. So people could remember, Featherstone winning the Challenge Cup and stuff. And they didn't show Don Fox too much, and that was good. It's been a year. No one, I say no one, not many of us will have lived through anything like this, and hopefully we won't live through anything like it again. And there'll be books and films and many things documenting this time in the future. But at least we somehow got through, and we're still here. I don't know what else to say, really. It's just been a rubbish year, and hopefully next year's better. And if it's not, we'll do the same again, because all we can do is just try and muddle on through.
But the salvation of a rubbish year has been the fact that Rugby League was credible throughout it all, and that people very kindly stuck with us when we all did what we could do to get through. And I think the other thing, without again getting too precious about it, is that we've always wanted to be a journal of record, and it's at times like this that you're not only recording what is happening so that people can get a sense of context, but next generation will go, what was that season where matches couldn't be played? Oh, look, there's somebody who's written about it, and we can at least get a feel for what it was like. So I think it was important that we all carried on, whether it be this podcast with different guests and in a different format, whether it was the magazine that for a lot of the time in the middle of the year wasn't writing about live rugby. It was trying to make sense of the situation that we were all in, and I just hope again that when we do see the other side of it, we can look back and go, now that was our generational test. We did what we could.
I'm not sure how we'll cope when we're back above the shop, behind the table, socially distanced with bits of plastic between us and everything, but we'll cope somehow. And what we'll always have, because we don't know what happened 125 years ago, whatever, when Manningham won the championship, because we weren't there, but we'll all have that memory of Jack Welsby pushing Bevan French out of the way and scoring the most amazing try to win a classic grand final. And that's what we'll have until the season starts again, when it comes back and we all moan about whatever's going on, and referees and overpaid players and coaches being rubbish and the TV coverage being crap. And what else do we moan about? We can't moan about Toronto anymore, so I don't know. I think a year ago, Sonny Bill Williams, we were all excited, and his mark on Super League is a photo with Danica. So, what can we do?
We can carry on regardless, and we will.
Yeah, as the beautiful South one said.
I was thinking more of the Carry On film, but that probably says more about my age than yours.
London 0, Hull 4. London, better not go there, had we? Because people will get upset. So that was 2020 on 4020 Not Live as we became. Phil, thank you very much for your time.
It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it for all the right and the wrong reasons.
It's been different. I do feel a bit emotional because it has been a strange year, but we got through, and we'll do it again next year, and we'll keep doing it as long as people want it, and as long as I get a press pass to get into the Rugby League. So RFL, please let me in next year. I've not said anything bad about you online, I don't think. I'm still waiting for the invitation to the 125th birthday party in Huddersfield, which we're all going to go to in August. Ralph Rimrose is a big slice of cake, and that £16 million we got from the government, that could pay for a big cake, and everyone who watches this programme knows we love cake.
Big fan of cake.
More than Rugby League itself, cake. A big Rugby League cake.
With Kevin Sinfield jumping out of it.
Lord Sinfield of Saddleworth. Rugby League's answer to Ian Botham, but thankfully not in a social media sense. And on that image, we'll finish there. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Look out for the Christmas special, which will get your brain going. I've decided to use that quiz I half wrote for some use. So
brilliant.
That will be out at some point. And now I've said it, I have to actually make it. We'll have a happy last couple of weeks of the year as much as you can do, because you're not allowed to go out or anything. And we'll be back, and you'll be back, and we'll all be back, and eventually we'll all be back in stadia, and we'll all be booing the refs and cheering our favourites and shouting, get them on side and forward and off, and it'll be like we'd never been away, hopefully.
And just stay safe, everyone.